Thank you, Becca, and welcome everyone on my behalf as well. I'm really excited to moderate this discussion with my colleagues, Zach and Wissam, and as a coach and a people leader myself, this is something that I think very highly of, like practical skills of how can we foster a culture of recognition. And before we jump into our agenda and our chat, I'd love to have both of my colleagues introduce themselves really quickly, so you know us all a little better. So as you introduce yourself, if you also want to share what you really wish to bring to this discussion today from your behalf, I'd love to have you share that as well. And at the same time, everyone in the chat can share what is one thing you wish to take away from this session today. Wissam, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thank you, Eva. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Wissam Khatib Nisser. I'm a leadership and executive coach and a trainer with John Maxwell team and a behavioral consultant. I've been working with Bravely for the past few years. And this topic is extremely important. I think in this workshop, we could emphasize how much successful leadership is important, and combined with meaningful recognition could create intrinsic motivation. And I think that's extremely important. That would basically create a highly engaged and productive team. So stay tuned and let's enjoy this. Zachary.
Thank you. My name is Zachary Ames, currently based in Salt Lake City, Utah, but I spent a lot of my career in New York City, as well as Singapore, so some international experience as well in financial services. The last few years, I have my own coaching consulting practice of XYZ leadership, and recently launched Prism Leadership, which is advancing the leaders within the LGBT community in their various organizations. I've been a coach with Bravely for the last 3 years, and very excited to not only be working with them and be here on their behalf, but also in terms of what we are hoping to learn today, would love to share with you maybe some distinctions even in the semantics and parse out what we think about and how we label some of these things, from appreciation to recognition, etc., and what is actually truly valuable to our employees.
Thank you both. Yeah, Wissam, when you mentioned the meaningfulness during Rebecca's icebreaker, I saw hearts coming up from the audience. So I think that's definitely something people are looking forward to discussing, or us discussing about. And Zachary, I love that you said about the semantics, because we often group appreciation and recognition under the same meaning, and there's some differences there. So really looking forward to discussing that piece as well. Great, let's get started. We're in good company, and yeah, please everyone keep the chat active. I'll try to monitor it as we move forward, but also we will have the Q&A in the end. So let's get started. At first, I'd love to hear your thoughts around why really is recognition such important skill for leaders. Zachary, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. I think one of the big things I've been talking to various leaders about lately is that we sometimes forget that people are people, right? There is a human being element in all of us, and even in our employees. And we used to even joke, an old HR manager and I, our jobs would be so much easier if it weren't for the people. And I'm not saying that in the sense of I wish for an automated big AI machine learning world. Say that in the sense of people and humans are complex. And so the needs that we have, the validation that we're looking for, the struggles that we're going through, a key component of leadership is that acknowledgement of what's happening for an individual. Do I actually not just appreciate who you are, as Wissam has said, right, that human piece, but do I really understand and acknowledge the circumstances? Am I aware, and can I relate and connect with you as humans? We have that social craving for connection, and acknowledgement and appreciation is such a simple and easy tool to provide that element of connection for our employees.
Absolutely, Wissam.
Well, I mean, I've read this book for Simon Sinek, the Leaders Eat Last, and it's interesting. He talks about that recognition, and it's all about biology. He says leaders should prioritize creating socially connected teams where appreciation and recognition is common among the teams, as they are linked to long-term happiness through serotonin, oxytocin, and just short bursts of dopamine from rewards. So it's biological to want recognition. I loved how Sinek puts it. And I think the combination of the social interaction and the recognition is where you have a balance of those chemicals in your body that builds intrinsic motivation, which is very interesting.
Yeah, what I hear both of you talk about is that recognition is not a nice to have. It's really our human need. It's our need to be seen and valued as who we are, but also what we do. And when we work hard for something, that it gets seen and recognized. So next question from that is that why then do you think so many leaders struggle with recognition and giving it to employees? Wissam, you want to go first this time?
I think it's because, first of all, maybe they don't know the preferred language of appreciation. I don't know if you've read this book, The 5 Languages of Love, and there's Gary Chapman and White. They wrote the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. So words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, physical touch. So if leaders put the effort to know their teams, do assessments, understand what is their language, just like with your partner, same thing with your teams. Imagine if you want to congratulate somebody for doing a great job and they are a steady person who they are more of a shy introvert, and you make it public, they're not going to feel good. So understanding that this person would rather have quality time, maybe sit down, maybe go have a coffee together, that to them is amazing. So speaking their language is extremely important. And not knowing the language, you become very generic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is such a common theme in coaching sessions where we discuss on like how to learn more about each individual that I manage and how to be curious about what works for them and how I can support them better. So yeah, being personalization is really, really important. Zachary,
Definitely.
what do you say?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's as important as that is, I think that is part of the complication, right? So depending on how big my team is, sometimes that feels like a Herculean task that I have to master this exactly what they want. I think the simplicity of that, though, is we want to get onto the target when we aren't necessarily always looking for the bullseye. And I think so often we think it has to be absolutely perfect and precise to take action. I don't think that's true. I think the other big factor that I have seen, especially in high performing companies, is that the bar and standard of what is good is so high that when we achieve it, we just assume that that is the expectation. And so even if someone is going above and beyond, I know in organizations I worked at, it was frustrating when that didn't seem to get recognized or you weren't rated a certain way or these things, but it's because that bar is at such a level. And I think that sometimes is a piece that we sometimes, as managers and leaders, we have our own pressure, we have our own goals and objectives, and we have our own KPIs, and we're hoping for our own recognition. And there's so much work to be done that sometimes this feels like it's extra and it's something in addition to. It's not just managing the workflow and managing the people, it's this other element. And I think the kind of secret in this is that if you let it be part of the mixture of your work and not a side dish is really important, right? And I think depending again on your personality or the type of work, there's that famous scene from Mad Men, right? When Peggy basically wants a thank you and Don Draper yells, "That's what the money's for." I think sometimes different companies or different styles or even sometimes managers have a hard time understanding why people want or need that thing because we are compensating, we are providing certain things. And so what else do you want or need? And so how do we go back to, as Wissam said earlier, recognizing that there is a human element, there's a biological component, and that there is, as the data shows, decreased turnover, increased engagement, higher productivity, all these things that are our sense of well-being is better if we do it the right way. So we have to move beyond some of those basics as well.
Yeah.
I would like to add something, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
To add to what Zachary is saying, you know, most of the sessions I have with executives and with any employee, if they're not happy, believe it or not, it's not about the salary. It's about not feeling valued, not feeling appreciated. Most of them, they if they want to leave or they're not happy, it's not about the salary. And we work for money, right? But you know, but in reality, they want to feel valued. They want to be seen as humans. And I think to add to Zachary's statements, it all boils down to the culture, which is embedded by leadership. So the way leaders create that culture of appreciation and recognition, it will trickle down to directors, to middle management, to the whole culture of the company. And that's what would make people stay and feel good and want to continue working for that company and not thinking of leaving. And it's not about the money anymore. It's amazing.
Yeah, and really what this makes me want to ask you next is like, well, what can leaders then do? What can individual leaders do to help build this culture of recognition and build it to be an important part of the culture, to share meaningful feedback? What kind of practical advice would you be able to give?
I'll jump in with a couple things. First, I do want to layer, just to maybe cap off the compensation conversation. We also can't recognize, and if you have a great culture of recognition, but compensation isn't there, that also doesn't work either, right? Compensation is the foundation. So I often think about it is that comp is about fairness, recognition is about awareness. And so that's a really key component piece, is that if it doesn't feel that it's fair, then it's incongruous to me. You can tell me, I actually have very personal experience with this. I was given a job title increase. The money didn't show up for 6 months later, and was told that very explicitly. So we'll give you the title, we'll recognize you, we'll roll out the red carpet and tell everyone you've done such a great job. But it was like your actions and your words aren't matching. Similarly, being told, oh, well, you get to go on this development program, but I knew in the market what my value was. And by the time, literally, if they'd only given me, I don't even think it was a 10% or something comp increase based on stuff that was happening, I left the company, I doubled my salary in my next career move. So there are some key elements, and I would have been saved for just a few $1,000s. So those, I think, are really important for us to recognize, that we can't use this as a band-aid to other things that don't show the fairness. But again, it's because even mentally, it does not sit where you can't tell me you value me and then not actually value me in very literal terms. So with that to the side, there are a few other things, and maybe we'll come back to some of the distinctions here, but I do want to give you, I'm saying, compensation is about fairness, recognition is about awareness. So just saw that in the chat there. Let me give you actually a really practical tool of maybe even how you say it, right? Because we talk a lot about, let me give you the card, let me do this. We know a lot of those pieces, but sometimes we don't even know what to say or how to actually indicate it to someone. So I often use what I think of as the FAIR feedback model. It's often very helpful for people when it comes to difficult feedback because I don't know how to necessarily structure it. But my favorite way to use it actually is when I'm acknowledging someone's effort or the work they've done in a positive way. I practice this. I'm a bit of a nerd around it. So Google reviews, Yelp reviews. After this session, I'll probably send Eva an email and use this in the model. And the FAIR. So F is to frame it. What is the context? Why are we setting or talking about this thing? A is the action. What's the actual behavior I saw, noticed, or witnessed? I is the impact. What actually was the result of that thing? And then what's the reinforcement? Let's do it some more. And it's a really simple piece, especially from the positive side, to say, hey, when we were getting and putting this whole thing together, I recognize that I couldn't attend the prep meeting, right? So that's the framing, the action, but you were able to record the thing, do this piece for me, whatever that was, and help do the extra effort. As an impact of that, I was able to go do this, this, and this, and I really appreciate that and your attention. And sometimes it's really easy to then reconnect company values to it so that they see where their behaviors are linking to results. And so, yes, as a result of teamwork or collaboration or transparency, blah, 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 blah. So I find that really easy for me. You can often do it in 2 to 3 sentences. You can shoot that off in a Slack. You can do that in an email. You can say it verbally, but it goes so much further than just, hey, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. That no longer makes it doesn't show that I'm actually aware of what you did. And the biggest thing that we want to know is that our work matters. And that's the impact piece. So that's sometimes a really easy thing to just try out, because even if you get it wrong, it still feels good to get that information, and you'll get better and better at it and get all 4 of those components as you move forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your model. That's really great. And I think what it helps to do is to create a habit. So if you use that FAIR model by Zach, you know that you're helping yourself to create a habit to make it more easier for you as a leader to keep sharing recognition and noticing it when it comes up. Wissam, what about you?
Well, I agree with, I really like the framework that Zachary presented. To me, I think recognition and appreciation ties into autonomy, providing autonomy, mastery, and purpose for the employees. I think if you are able to recognize and appreciate your team and provide them with that environment of autonomy, mastery, as in growing, growth, their own growth, what's in it for them, right? It's not only a good job, no, what's in it for them. Autonomy, being able to be creative, being able to work on their own terms. We have different personalities, we're different people, we like to work in different ways. I have ADHD, for example. Okay, I need to go take a walk every half an hour to just recollect my thoughts and so on and so forth. Mastery, something that is related to my growth, and purpose. I'm doing something purposeful, something meaningful for me. And I think this would fuel my intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is you waking up in the morning, wanting to go to work. You don't need external or extrinsic motivation like us as coaches. I love it when a client says, you changed my life. But I do it because I love my job. If nobody tells me anything, I'm still motivated. I'm still waking up in the morning and going to work and happy to deliver, happy to add value to people and change lives. That's intrinsic motivation. So if leaders understand how to speak to their audience, which is their teams, so the language of appreciation, and connect it to their growth, to them as people, to their mastery, to their purpose, this can build intrinsic motivation, which is amazing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And what you both are talking about is that you love to give recognition to others. And one way to think of also why leadership has such an important role in creating the culture of recognition is that when they give out recognition, it boosts the culture and makes others want to give it as well, right? Of course, programs and structures are important, but one aspect of this is also like, how do we motivate people to notice when their peers do well and they deserve recognition, whether it's a small thing or big thing. So I think the peer-to-peer recognition, I'm really looking forward to that email, Zach. Now you got me already excited of what's to come. So yeah, you know, it makes us motivated, and then we want to share. When we get something good, we want to give it forward often, and that's how it becomes a culture. And leadership, of course, has the leading role in it. So thank you both. And we spoke about a little bit of the how to create it to be a habit. And the other aspect there that we often run into is like, it needs to feel authentic. We know that it needs to be authentic to the person who's giving the recognition. So if I'm a leader and I want to say something, it shines through if it's not authentic to my direct report. But then also the direct report will feel it, like that person doesn't really know what I did, or doesn't know how much work I put into it, or whatever the situation is. Anyway, we know if it's not real, if it's not authentic. How can leaders work with the authenticity, still making sure that they do not fall into that trap that Zach, you were talking about earlier, of like thinking it needs to be really great performance if to be recognized? What are your thoughts on the authenticity piece, how to maintain it?
I'll jump in briefly. I think there's a few ways to look at this overall. And I think sometimes what we think about in recognition is like this big to do or have this big result. Well, you know, we have to talk about what's public or private, and we have the award or whatever. A key distinction here is that our rewards and our awards are not recognition. Those are a delivery tool for your message, right? And so when we think about this, at least at that authenticity level, that's where this becomes a daily practice. So the first is that daily, you just need to appreciate them who they are and what they're doing. And are you aware that someone is out that day and didn't come in? And do you check on, like, do you just have the basic awareness of them as a person, right? The simple, that level of, hey, how are you? Did you remember that they mentioned the kids' soccer game that was happening over the weekend? And you don't have to be the biggest social butterfly to know all that, or they've been the big small talker, but it's that little piece that says, hey, I see you as another person. Then we get into the level of acknowledgement, namely of circumstances. And this is when you actually have insight and a little bit of emotional intelligence to say, hey, we were down some staff and you came and pitched in, or there was a storm and you were able to do whatever, or I recognize you put in some extra hours after you put the kids down. That really meant a lot to help us as we were transitioning over to our APAC team's hours, right? Same thing, even when I was in Asia, we always had the night calls so that we could have the global team call, and we were rarely acknowledged for the extra hours we were putting in, the dinners I didn't get to go to with friends. That simple thing of like, hey, I'm just aware of what you're doing is really important. Those things, acknowledgement then is more of a constant awareness, not necessarily a daily practice. Then the recognition really sits in the space of our effort and our progress, right? That's not the results. That's where rewards and awards come in, is here's the result, here's the achievement. But if you think about Chris Littlefield is an expert in this space, has his company called Beyond Thank You. And one of the examples he gives that I love is like, how terrible would it be if you were a basketball player and the whole stadium was filled, but no one cheered or said any or did anything until the very end of the buzzer, and we saw, did we win or did we lose? And then we decide what to say about it. No, we want constant recognition for the effort that's going on. Was that a good play? Do we get the wow? Do we get the applause? That's the kind of stuff that gets us to our results. And that has been, at least in his data, is at least every 7 days or so, we should be making some sort of acknowledgement of the effort and progress. Easy to do in your one-on-ones, right? Super simple. Bring me up to speed what's going on, and then just reflect back and acknowledge the stuff they've said. And then, of course, in much more situational elements is where we start to reward and award.
Yeah, really to incorporate it to your one-on-ones and daily actions, and like not think of the destination but the journey, which is maybe a bit of a cliche saying, but works in this situation again really well. What about you, Wissam? What do you have on the authenticity piece?
Oof. Definitely. I mean, everything Zachary said. Adding to that, I think, personalized messaging, right? Knowing your team. It's so important to. I remember I was working for a manufacturer, and our MD. I was looking at him, and I was so impressed. He went down to the factory, and he knew every person by name. They were. I was so impressed by him, and I was like, "Hey, how did he do that?" And he's like, "I spent time writing." His secretary went and wrote the names of everybody with pictures, and he put it, and he was memorizing it, memorizing the name and the picture of each one in the factory, and it was a learning experience for me. I was so impressed by him, and I said that's proper leadership. And he knew everybody by name, and then some of their families. I think that's awesome. That's authenticity, is doing that extra effort, right?
Yeah. Again, we go back to the knowing your people and being curious and wanting to know your people, and then remembering those little details which can be remarkable when they come up. And I just want to take a little moment and look into the chat, because not only is there excitement about some tools that Zachary shared here, but also we just got a note from Danielle that her mind is blown right now. So some recognition for your work and our work in this session already. Thank you for sharing that, Danielle. That means a lot. So, okay, we discussed about how to make sure the recognition feels authentic, both for the giver and the receiver. One thing that comes up often in coaching, at least for me, and I'm sure maybe for you also, is making sure that the work and the effort is seen, especially by senior leadership. Like leaders are wondering, like, how do I make sure that not only am I doing this daily and it's part of my practice, but that my teams and the individuals in my teams, their work is seen by senior management. What are your tips on this area? How to make sure that not only the team's work is seen, but also the leaders who's leading that team and their work is seen and so recognized, hopefully, as well. Wissam, do you want to start?
I think leadership is to succeed in the success of others, right? As a rule of thumb. And if my team is doing great and they're hitting their KPIs, they're happy, they're enjoying work-life balance, the energy is right on all of this, you're ticking all those boxes, that means I'm a great leader. Because of what I'm doing, I'm providing them the tools and resources for them to be successful. So I succeed in the success of my team. Now, this is in a perfect world, of course. And another thing that proper leaders usually do, you take the blame if something goes wrong, you give credit when something goes right. So I think it's in leadership, the whole team is one, and it all reflects on the leader. Like in basketball or football, the coach is not playing, but they all like him. They all celebrate him or her because of the performance of the team. So same thing.
Yeah, really to see yourself as a leader, as part of the team, and advocate for your team. And I feel like that's already recognition when you do that as a leader, no matter what happens after that. But that's seen by your team and gets a lot of importance. What about Zach? What do you think?
So a really simple thing that I've seen, I bet many of you probably do this, right? But there's really an easy thing to do is just to forward on emails of, right? I've seen that many times, sometimes in reverse, is like when a senior leader says, hey, we really appreciated, this great event that happened. When that leader replies, but again, to Wissam's note, is maybe I actually give credit to that person and I CC that person. Or I've also been the recipient of those emails that said, hey, just so you know, the head of that department said this really nice thing about you. The leader doesn't also just keep that information. Sometimes that top-down recognition is important. It's not just how do we move the message up, it's how do we actually say people are noticing. The other big piece here, I think, is also that we sometimes think we have to be like wizards or ninjas in this space and figure it out, and that this authenticity comes from a place of magic. And the reality is you can just ask people what they want, what they're looking for, how they prefer it. Oftentimes when I work with first-time managers, it's one of the first questions I have them ask their new people, and vice versa, to tell their manager and say, here's how the question we got at the very beginning: how do you appreciate being recognized? Now, that doesn't mean it's the only way to get that, but I want to link that though to this idea of career progression and learning, particularly with millennials. I think most employees in general, but there's a lot of things out there around millennials who are wanting career growth, and that if they aren't earning or they are not learning, they're moving on. And so that's a big piece of, back to this idea of recognition, is do they want that recognition? Do they know, do I even know what leaders need to see so-and-so's work? Is that because they want to make a career move and get into sales, even though they've been in account management? Well, I shouldn't be telling just the account management team about this great person. How do I network across in other directions, right? Or does it matter that the president or the CEO sees this? Maybe not. Maybe that's too high. What the individual's goals? I remember one person recently was sharing that someone basically thought they were doing the right things, saying, we recognize you, we see the potential in you, but they handed a 5-year career plan for them. It's like, as long as you keep doing what you're doing, here is the potential future you have. And she was just like, oh my gosh, they didn't consult me, they didn't ask me if this is what I wanted, and got so nervous, and all of a sudden realized, if I just go in default, they're going to decide my life and my career for me, and made a whole shift. It was that dramatic. So sometimes it's as simple as just saying, what are your career goals? Providing feedback around that, acknowledging and moving up the channel the great moments that that person did that helps them get strategically to where they want to be. That all then combines and looks like and feels like the value and recognition that they are seeking, far beyond any sort of card or plaque or an extra hour off on the weekend.
Absolutely.
I would like to add something, if you don't mind. Sorry to interrupt you, Eva. Zachary, when you were talking about it's so difficult to ask, or or employees come to their managers and say, oh, that's how I like appreciation, or that's my appreciation language. It is tricky, right? You can't do that, or go to someone and ask them, because you lose authenticity as well. So
very quickly with some, I'm saying, yes, go do that.
Oh, go ask.
Yeah.
You're saying go. Okay.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
I mean, if
we were to throw a birthday party, do you want everyone in the conference room singing to you, or do you want me to send flowers privately to your desk with no acknowledgement?
All right. So yeah, you could go ask. Another way, I thought you said it's sometimes awkward, but if going and asking is definitely the best choice. But another way would be, what I've seen leaders do is doing an assessment, like the DISC assessment or MBTI, or any of those assessments for their teams, and then every manager for their own teams, where they understand the personality type, what are their biggest fear, what is the language they prefer, how to connect with them, and really investing in that exercise, because you can get to know your team extremely well. You can get to know how to talk to them, how to connect with them, what's important to them. I think that's one way that it could be done, if you don't want to go and ask. But yes, asking is. But I would ask. I would go and ask the employee, how do I say thank you to you? how can I appreciate you? What's your language? I would do that. Yeah, but one of them is that.
And that's easy with an assessment to say, hey, I recognize your ID. This is what's typical. Does that resonate with you? Or
exactly,
if you don't have that
S or
first time relationship, if they're new, that's easy. And then it's also sometimes to say, hey, I just went to this webinar. We talked about recognition. I would love to ask you, what is it? But then the authenticity is what I actually follow through on.
Yes.
It's not inauthentic to ask, right? That's what I mean is this, we don't have to be ninjas, you don't have to be wizards. You don't have to be scared to ask someone, right?
100%.
It's like with our partners. I don't have to, I know what my partner did or did not like about something, but it's because we've talked about it or we've had experiences. If I've been on your team, say over the last year, what stood out to you the most or what recognition felt the most valuable to you and why?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's how you can get the language.
But their experience might be something else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ooh, yeah. That also.
No, I want to give again recognition to our chat, because this came up there as a practice that Danielle is using in company that she works for, is asking when a new employee joins, like, okay, how do you like to do these things? And what I've seen personally in the past that has been really considerate way of doing that is to have like a form that everyone fills when they joins. And it doesn't need to be just in onboarding. It can be later, like, do you celebrate birthdays? Not everybody does, like DD also referred to, or what are your preferences? And then you don't put anyone on spot in any way, but we'll learn from them and don't even need any extra tools for that. But I love this discussion here. And I want to also give a shout out to Lindsay, I think, who shared in the chat how reframing thoughts around recognition is maybe something that came through from this session. And like, even if you don't need recognition yourself, it's valuable to somebody else. And that reframing sounds like really powerful. So thank you for sharing, Lindsay.
And
we've spoken. Yes, you can.
To that point of oftentimes we view, and again, personal partners are always an easy way to think about this. Our preferences are not always the same as everyone else's. And so sometimes we think, oh, of course, this is how it feels good to get recognized because that feels good to me. The other big piece on that when we think about various elements of diversity and unconscious bias and stuff is the simple acknowledge, right? Like right now is the Autumn Moon Festival. And so many of our Chinese and Asian colleagues are celebrating, or they're missing their family, or for the, if they're living somewhere else, these are big moments. Or I would see those things where it makes national headlines because it's maybe a Western news event, and yet things would happen and a typhoon would hit or other natural disasters in Asia, and even the New York headquarters had no acknowledgement of their own employees of disasters that took place. And in the reverse of what worked really well as a fairly personal, maybe slightly vulnerable moment, during the Pulse Club shootings, I had a colleague, I was a contractor at the time, not necessarily even a full-time employee, and someone came over to my desk and said, hey, the Pride ERG is gathering downstairs in a conference room. We just want to make sure that people feel safe and can express any needs that they might have. That to me was so important, not as recognition of me of doing good work or the trials I've overcome, but to that point of the acknowledgement of circumstance, the awareness of you as an individual and a human, and that we will provide something for you in that moment. And it was also amazing to see the people who did not notice or acknowledge that moment, right? And so that is one of those big things as a leader. It doesn't mean you have to be a mental health expert. It doesn't mean you have to give the resource. It doesn't mean you have to have the right words of comfort or consolation. But what matters is that you can acknowledge it and hopefully help connect them to the thing that they need, or simply say, what do you need? if you need to go home early today and take some time for yourself, or vice versa. Maybe it's better that you are distracted and you stay busy at work, right? But next week, and just say, I'm here if you need me. So that's the other piece, I think, to that earlier question of why is this challenging, is sometimes we think we have to have all the answers or we have to do everything perfectly. And it is amazing what happens of just a little bit of acknowledgement and a little bit of vulnerability goes miles for someone in the moment that matters to them.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful about the circumstances, and how we can't forget how in difficult circumstances, even actions that maybe normally wouldn't get recognized, recognizing those in those challenging circumstances is very, very important. And I was actually taking a sneak peek to an earlier session today in the webinar, and there was somebody bringing this up in the chat, how they appreciated what someone did because they knew they were going through a lot. And I think that's very, very important. We are almost up our time, but I do want to still get a quick thoughts on something, because we humans often fear that we give too much of the good thing, right? That people get spoiled if they hear too much acknowledgement or recognition. So what are your tips to managers or leaders, how they can balance giving recognition with more critical, constructive feedback? Wissam, want to start?
Sure. Well, again, all right. So first of all, it's the culture that is embedded by leaders. So this is important. Okay, a culture of appreciation and recognition. The second thing is understand your audience. Know what they like, what would resonate with them, so you could personalize any appreciation to them authentically. Okay. That the third thing that I think is extremely important is to keep it authentic. Don't overdo it. Okay, and when there is only do it when it's due. Okay, in my humble opinion, and I guess definitely try and create intrinsic motivation within your team. This is I think is very, very important.
For me, this is the core of leadership. Very respectfully, if you are a leader who is worried, oh my gosh, am I giving too much recognition that they're going to get the wrong idea and overinflate their sense of self, or that they feel they're going to deserve a promotion that they don't deserve? If that's the case, then you're not leading effectively and correctly, because what that actually looks like is full communication on all sides. So using, again, that fair feedback model, that can also be done in the places where they're struggling, when that project didn't hit the mark, when the impact, right? And that's the big reason why all four of those are key elements, is I've seen that moment where someone didn't include the impact of the action. So the person fills in the blanks and goes, well, they didn't seem angry or too upset when they told me that thing. And I know that if they do it one more time, they might actually get fired. So your job as a leader is to effectively communicate where your people stand. And that doesn't mean that I have to withhold recognition. It means I need to be honest and open and be a true partner for their goals and their efforts. And then when I'm giving feedback, I'm not hesitating on that in either direction, because I can come in and say, hey, this was a really great piece. This is what worked really well. Here's some areas where I think we can improve. And I'm not stressed by that. Feedback from a leader who is my partner feels like progress. Feedback from a leader who is not my partner feels like criticism and moving backwards. That's when it becomes tenuous. So if you aren't taking the time to make sure your people know where they are at all times, on both the positive, on the negative, what the actual weight of that impact is, then we have a much bigger issue than, oh my God, did I tell that person good job too many times? If that's the question you're asking, my guess is you're not having the real honest conversations around actual performance.
I think that circles back to many of the earlier points that you both have made about the kind of meaningfulness and the communication, and really making this part of the culture, and not thinking of recognition as a standalone thing, but like part of the whole holistic communication that also impacts then to our intrinsic motivation. Thank you both. I think we're at the time where I'll give the microphone to Becca, and she will lead us to the next step.